see the contents of tonight. So let's jump into our work tonight. Again, thanks for engaging in that opener. Want to make sure that I'm queuing you up for what's next to come. So that should say class reaction number 3. Yes, the third class reaction, which is due this Saturday, February 13th at midnight. So make sure you get that work in. And then also by next Wednesday, please have Milner's pages 57 through 73 read, and we're going to do some discussion around that next week. So just 2 items. And again, I always make sure that I post this in the announcement. So if you forget, you can always go back there to check. And I think Cody gave the idea of posting the folder for where all the resources come from this class. So that's all going to be handy reference for you in the announcement section. I completely forgot to do this last week. I'm so sorry. I did not have it in the slides. I realized I was looking back. So if you could take 30 seconds to read through the norms and silently identify with the one that you want to work on tonight. This is something that you find perhaps a growth area or something that you really want to channel your energy in, because today was whatever, fill in the blank. So take 30 seconds to read through and just in your brain commit yourself to one of those. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen for just oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to continue sharing the screen. Can I get, let's do just one person. Can you read out the 2 objectives of tonight?
I can if you want.
Go ahead, Cody.
All right, objectives. Teachers will examine elements of the 3rd essential component of classroom management. Teachers will reflect on themes from Milner's Understanding the Landscape of Classroom Management and Haberman's The Pedagogy of Poverty versus Good Teaching. Sorry, I'm like echoing.
No, it doesn't sound like you're echoing on our end, but thank you so much. So these might seem a little familiar, and by these I mean that second one. So we were going to prioritize this last week, but that's okay. We're going to read this article tonight, and we're going to connect it to the reading, and we're going to also look at that 3rd essential component of classroom management. So now I am going to stop sharing my screen. So we last week did some work as a group to review Milner, pages 11 through 24, and you all had some really great thinking. So in just a moment, you're going to get the link to that document in the chat. So I just shared it with you. If you could pull that up, I'm going to talk at you as you click that link. So Chastity, we're so happy to have you back in this virtual space, and I'm glad that perhaps by face value, it looks like your health has at least somewhat returned. So we're so appreciative to have you with us. Chastity, just so you know, and just to recap for everyone tonight, we looked at Milner pages 11 through 24. If you don't mind grabbing that as you pull that document up as well, that would be great. So as a reminder, you signed up for a question that you wanted to review with the group and kind of give your thoughts. And then you also selected a thought partner who would be your response person. So Chastity, perhaps you can be you can be at the ultimate summarizer of all things questions. So I just want to make sure that your voice is heard. So what's going to happen is this: Barah, Haley, Matthew, and Cody, with their partners, Haley, Genevieve, Cody, and Steve, are going to review these questions that they thought of and read through the text. And then Chastity, we would love to hear from you if you feel comfortable in doing so at the very end, after Cody and Steve engage in a little thought partnership, any additional thoughts that you would like to add, or something from the text from pages 11 through 24 that resonated with you. So let's do this. I'm going to give you just a minute to get situated. So you need your text, You, Barah, Haley, Matthew, Cody, and Haley, Genevieve, Cody, Steve. You are on deck, but Austin, Genevieve, Andrew, Derica, Steve, Barah, Andrew, Austin, Matthew, Derica, the people who aren't highlighted, that means that you're resuming the active listening role. So if you're not highlighted, it's not that you don't have anything to do. It's just that you're doing some active listening. I'm going to stop talking and give those 4 people / also Chastity a minute just to get situated, remind themselves of what they were reviewing. I'll put the music on lightly in the background, and if it bothers you, just turn it down. Take 30 more seconds. All right. So still sharing my screen. Pause on this music for a second. So in our work from last week, reading from the reading that was assigned for last week, which was the first part of chapter 1, Milner helped us to understand the landscape of classroom management. So Barah is going to kick it off for us by describing what institutional and system barriers are and how teachers can either positively or negatively contribute to this. So Barah, you are on when you're ready.
So institutional and systemic barriers are what, I guess, the upper or the main, I'm trying to explain what it is, but like the hierarchy chooses what the teachers do or don't do. So it makes it difficult for the teachers to show, their students that they care and connect with them. Milner says that they are pressured by the administrator to follow a certain frame of referral for discipline management approaches, which can make it very difficult for the teachers to connect with their students to the maximizing or support students maximizing their capacity. And then he also talks about how it can make the experience less ideal because there's not enough support from the administrator, and it shows the students that maybe the teacher forgot to care about them, or it shows that the teachers are more concerned about student test scores than what the students are learning or are not. And finally, he says that the lack of administrative supportive was a central cause and concern for their avoidance of certain curriculums and topics in their curriculums. And because of that, I mean, the teachers just don't feel supported by the administrator, and there's a lot of, I guess, there's a lot of things they can't do that they might want to do.
Well said. Thank you.
Hope that made sense.
Yeah. Haley, what are your thoughts to respond to what Barah said, or anything else from the text that you wanted to add on with?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most important implications of this text that Milner doesn't really dive into, but I think is important to highlight, is just that institutional and systemic problems require institutional and systemic solutions. So I think the importance of like thinking about the hierarchy and how like the bureaucracy functions and the relationships between teachers and administrations and students, I think it demands that teachers, like, you can't just create what you feel like is an ideal environment in your own classroom and then ignore the environment that students step into as soon as they leave. Like, if you really want to advocate for students, you can't just do it in your room. You need to advocate for students in your building, and in your district and beyond.
Yeah, that's super well said. And I appreciate that you are both naming things from page 23 that I also highlighted in that last full paragraph where Milner talks about the need for supports from many places. I also appreciate what he mentions about um, institutional expectations and the ways that this can be perpetuated in our spaces is through voicelessness. He also mentions chaos, disconnections, mismanagement, and that the desire for order or control can also be connected to, with the need to like teach to the test, to improve scores, so that perhaps maybe that could also perpetuate, this need to obey or follow directions, and all of these things perpetuate exactly what you both have named. So thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate you. Haley, you get to share again as we pivot slightly. Haley's going to talk about this phrase that you might have heard before, where we say, I don't see race. So what's an implication or implications of saying or hearing this?
Yeah, so I'm going to start by reading a part of directly from the text because it's like one of the few parts that's just like italicized. Like the authors clearly want to draw our attention to it. On page 21, the authors write, because many teachers adopt colorblind ideologies in their work with students, pretending that they do not see or recognize race, they are missing important features and dimensions of students' identities. As a result, teachers are attempting to co-develop learning communities populated with students whom they perceive in fragmented, disconnected, and incomplete ways. So basically, the implication of saying that you have like a colorblind, that you don't see color, first of all, you do. And second of all, when you refuse to see race, or if you ignore race, you're also ignoring racism. So actually, like being aware of race and being aware of your relationship to race and like the dynamics of race in your classroom is really, really important. Not only to like calling out discrimination and identifying discrimination, but also just like seeing your students as people. Because like, I don't know, for example, I told somebody once like that I was queer, and they were like, oh, well, to me, you're just a person. And I was like, wait a minute, those are mutually exclusive categories. Like if you're queer, you're not a person. So I think that there's like a similar thing can happen with other dimensions of identity, where like if you ignore it, you're actually ignoring the humanity of the person in front of you. That's all I have to say about that.
Really, really well said, Haley. Genevieve, love to hear your thoughts and reflections on what Haley said and / or anything else you wanted to pull from the text.
Okay, so Haley's right, obviously. But it's so important to not say you're colorblind, because that's like saying, well, I don't really see you as a person. Like, you wouldn't tell someone, well, I don't see you as you wouldn't tell a white person, I don't see you as white. You know what I mean? So why would you say that to anybody else? That's ridiculous. And if you don't teach the history that is relevant to students, then they don't care. You have to make it personal in order for them to make those connections. So you can't say you're colorblind and effectively teach what you need them to learn.
Yeah, I appreciate what both of you have said, and you guys have both really hit on the implications of believing or thinking something like this, if this is something that you hear someone else has said. The other implication I see in this that Milner hints at is if we ignore color, then we're also ignoring the discriminatory practices that we see in our buildings. So this whole chapter highlights the inequities, like higher suspension rates for African American students, along with several other examples. So if we say things like, I don't see race, then we're inherently saying that we don't see that the things that are happening, one, are a problem, and that two, that we are further perpetuating that. So really good work, Haley and Genevieve, for uncovering some of the implications behind that. Thank you guys so much. Matthew and Cody are going to talk about in what ways teachers perpetuate institutional and systemic barriers. So Matthew, we'll start with you, and then Cody, you're on deck.
So thank you, Haley and Genevieve, and Bara as well, and everyone who's spoken so far. The two things that I want to touch on that I think are relevant to the text as well as relevant to my pre-service experiences at the school that I work at is learning about what we've all heard about, which is like the achievement gap, as well as also talking about like differentiation and what that looks like. And so I think like in what ways can teachers perpetuate institutional and systemic barriers? I think a lot of something that many teachers often overlook is the connection or not willing to differentiate between differentiated content versus differentiated curriculum. Like, and what I mean by that is saying that like sometimes in order to make sure that students in their class are successful, teachers will unintentionally or otherwise dumb down standards and objectives in order to pass students, or because they feel like their students are not where they need to be. Whereas in reality, when we don't give those students the opportunity to grapple and the opportunity to succeed, then we're only like perpetuating those gaps between students who are not where they need to be versus their counterparts in better off school districts and environments.
Really
Right.
well said, Matthew. Yeah. Yep. There's
So,
actually a
sorry.
really great reading that supports all the things that you have mentioned. And it's so important that we're giving kids access to these things. If we're not, again, we are exactly what you're saying, perpetuate that the institutional and systemic barriers. So thank you so much. Were you going to say something else? I'm sorry, I can't see your face, so I can't read the cues.
Oh, that was me. I was going to respond to Matthew.
Cody, you're on.
Yeah, so pretty much what he's saying is that, you know, some teachers, they deny access to certain aspects of the curriculum because they feel the student isn't smart enough or mentally capable of doing that. So they set the bar so low, and that's not good. A good teacher sets the bar high, because when you set the bar low, you're creating that barrier and you're not letting them get to that next level. And also, one of the quotes that I really liked about this is, in such classrooms, teachers give information and the students have little, if any, voice and perspective in the learning environment. This approach can result in a vicious cycle that is consistent with Freire's notion that students are often passive participants in their own learning, with teachers consistently attempting to pour knowledge or information into an empty vessel. And this is on page 23. And that's pretty much what I encountered in high school. Teachers would tell you to sit down, be quiet, and then they'd lecture. Then you do a packet. There would be no discussion. There would be nothing more to that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Really, really well said, Cody.
Would I be able to add something to that?
Please do. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. No, I just wanted to add something that I actually just talked to my cooperating teacher about. The school that we're in is Hogan Prep, and I guess like it's predominantly Black students. And so I had this whole conversation with my CT about the grading and how she sees it, because we actually talked specifically about whether letting the students fail or not. She was saying she would never let a student fail because then she's denying them access to a better education after high school. She, doesn't think high school should set you back like that. And specifically because of, I guess, the type of students that she does teach, and the opportunities they are given, which are very limited. And so she mentions that, it's, as teachers, we don't dumb things down, but rather we give them a better chance at succeeding and entering a world of a whole new opportunities.
100% agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think like what you all have mentioned too, it's like the way in which we reflect is like on our intentions, and like no doubt that everybody in this space, and the people that I've worked with, and in the building I'm at currently and previously, like, have that best intention for kids. It's when we critically evaluate our intentions to say, but are we actually helping students or hurting students? And so, Bra, I really appreciate that you named that. That's part of this, like, this whole lived experience. There's been countless times, even last year, well, every year, all the time. I weigh heavily on some of my actions last year in ways I worked to perpetuate barriers as opposed to dismantling them. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing these stories. Appreciate you guys. All right, so Cody and Steve. Cody, he's going to start us off again for talking about what's best teaching for students, and then Steve, you're on deck.
All right, well, first I'd like to start off with saying what best teaching is not. It's not a one-size-fit-all approach. Everyone is different. So what I believe the best type of teaching is a culturally responsive type of teaching. So pretty much what that means is that you have a recognition of your own ethnocentrism. You have a knowledge of the student's culture. You understand the broader social, economic, and political systems in education. You have appropriate management strategies, and you develop a caring classroom. And to convey a really good culturally responsive practice, what you do is you insist that the teacher understand and draw from cultural assets and vantage points of the students, families, and communities. In short, you stress that teachers study their student and use their students' experiences as cultural data sets as they model instructional moves to maximize the students' opportunities to learn, page 24. So that is the best type of teaching. You want to show that you understand, that you care about your students, and you go at it from a culturally responsive way, not oh, I set up this curriculum, this is one size fit all, I'm going to teach everyone the same. No, everyone can be taught differently. And yeah, that's my answer.
Good thinking. Really good thinking, Cody. And I appreciate you referencing the text in that response, because those are some powerful words. Steve, what are your thoughts based on what Cody said, and any other things that you'd like to add?
I mean, can I just say well said? And
well, thank you.
I feel like I feel like he hit it just right, you know, like like the first thing he said, like, you know, just saying like to view those students is all different, you know, that's something I strongly believe in, having that multicultural view, understanding your own bias, things like that we've talked about. Yeah, you know, I don't think I could really add or say anything better. I feel like he touched on it a bit, honestly. So
yeah, no, I agree. Even what you had to add, Steve, that is those are some really great examples that you've pulled from the text to make sure that we are, as on page 25, Milner quotes Ladson Billings in saying that culturally responsive teaching situates culture as central, not as tangential to teaching and learning exchange. And what they mean by that is that students are really central to classroom operations. They are able to participate. They are able to really be an active participant and play an active role in the classroom as opposed to being passive. And that connects to what we had discussed previously with the various teaching styles at play here. So really great work, everyone. I see Matthew, you raised your hand. I'm gonna stop sharing. Give me a second. All right, Matthew, you're on. Oh, and then we're gonna pop over to Chastity.
Thank you. So I actually wanted to say, to speak, because Cody, when he started that last conversation, he said things that really got me going. And like, I know I'm sure Melissa, you know, as like in your professional development, that like differentiation is very much like a buzzword right now, I think, in education. But I think it goes deeper than just like differentiating with like students who have IEPs or 504s, for example. For example, my school has been virtual this entire school year. And so we have it, with the exception of a few kids with special needs who need in-person instruction. Like the vast majority of our kids have been virtual. And halfway through last semester, we as a middle school decided to to like completely revamp the virtual schedule, and every single one of us like extended our extended office hours in the afternoon for students to come see us on their own time. And like certain students that like don't, I feel bad saying this, but certain students who don't achieve as well as I know they could, when they come see me on one-on-one, or when they come see me with a peer or with a small group, like they're like, just when you like those small changes and just seeing that achievement go up so considerably for those particular students who need that support is so gratifying. Like I get so happy when I get to change their scores to a higher score because they decided to go to the different environment and learn. And it's so gratifying to see the positive results of that kind of differentiation.
Thank you for sharing that personal narrative. That's great. Chastity, love to hear your thoughts too, based on, before we end this completely, on what we just discussed from last week. Anything that you heard that resonated with you, or that you'd like to add, or something from the text that you wanted to bring up with the team? Your final thought.
Sure, I'll go for it. Something that has recently, I don't want to say has been brought to my attention, but we're discussing similar concepts in my counseling in a pluralistic society class as well. And whenever we were talking about the ways that teachers or educators, like I'm not a teacher, but I'm going to be a counselor, and the ways that we like inadvertently or advertently like perpetuate like systemic racism and these things, I was thinking about just like who's creating the curriculum and who are the people who are publishing the textbooks that we're using, and what history is being published in those textbooks, and what is the context. Oh no, my computer heard me say history and thought I said, "Hey Siri," and it's trying to talk to me. But basically just thinking about like standardized testing, and just like how contextually flawed standardized testing is, and how it's not like culturally encompassing, and just like all of these types of things as educators that we need to be mindful of, like something as simple as being mindful whenever you're gathering your like resources or your like materials for class, like something as simple as sending home a worksheet, and is the imagery on that worksheet representative of the population of students that you're giving that to, or is it all 5 white kids and you're teaching to a diverse population of student body? Like just like small things like that. I feel like I'm rambling because I didn't really have an answer prepared, but
no, I think that you have really great thoughts to add to all of this. And we are going to continue to build on this notion of like, not notion, the practice, the belief, the mindset of what is culturally responsive teaching and what is culturally responsive management. And there's so many things that are encapsulated by this. It's our thinking, it's our practices, it's our beliefs, it's what we do, it's what we don't do. And so I appreciate that you really started our trends in the right direction here. And actually, you have transitioned us perfectly into our next essential component. One of these elements that we're going to explore that makes classroom management work and makes a culturally responsive classroom management system effective is our classroom management technique number 3. So it's not really a technique, it's an essential component. So wherever you're capturing your essential components, whether that's in writing or if that's on a Word doc, you want to get that out, because we are going to explore the third one. And as you're getting up that document or that page in your notebook, you're going to want to write down this: plan your time and to the second. So I want you to write that down or capture that somewhere. And that's essential component of classroom management number 3. And I just abbreviated all of that. So you got it in the chat. So as you're writing that down, yes.
The second one was engaging teaching. What was the first one? I don't.
The first one,
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
I have a different notebook.
That's okay. And I'm going to make sure that we have them all in one place too.
It was engaging teaching.
I was just saying, engaging teaching, and
That was the
The
first
second one was
The second-
relationships.
Yeah. So it's engaging teaching, relationships, and then plan your time.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry.
It's all good.
You are great. And I just wanted to tell you the way I had it worded, because I know sometimes what I say doesn't always match what I wrote down. So yeah, engaging teaching. I think we called it building relationships. I think that's how we had number 2 listed. And then this third one is plan your time to the second. So as we look at this third one, there's going to be 2 resources that we explore in duos. And so in just a moment, you're going to get a link in the chat, but I'm not going to put it to you yet because it's better for me to tell you directions before giving you them. Okay.
Can I just add?
Yes, please.
Today's class is going to be great for me because I struggle with this.
Okay, great. I'm so excited. Hey, I am like a lived reality here. I'm like, I want to get done all these things with you all. And I'm like, okay, we're not going to get that done. So I could benefit from all of these things as well. So thank you for that honest reflection.
Yeah, I felt like you're calling me out.
No, I'm not calling. No. We're building our capacities and our toolboxes. So in just a moment, you're going to look at 2 separate resources I have for you. So the first one is called the Lesson Plan Student and Teacher Actions. So in this resource, I don't want to give you all the answers or anything. You're going to notice that the lesson plan, I want you to look at how it's the framework of it is laid out. So you'll see the teacher actions here on the left side and then the student actions here on the right side. I'm going to tell you this is not an exemplar lesson plan by any means. So I'm not really looking for you to kind of critique the content. It's more so I just want you to take away how does this lesson plan capture teacher actions and student actions? So that's the first link that you have there. And then the second one is called lesson plan double planning. So when you pull up this link, you're going to see a worksheet that a teacher has created, and he has also written like sub questions or wonderings on the side through comments. So you can scroll through, and you don't necessarily need to check this for like the content, like, oh, look at how these questions are written or how are students responding. I want you to really just think about how double planning, which is planning like the actual work that kids are doing and like what you're going to say to them as they're working or prior to them working, how that also assists here in the planning process. So these are 2 separate documents, and here is what I want you to think through. So we're going to do like a KWL here. So the K part is what I notice, the W part is what you wonder, and then the L part is what you learn. So in each of these documents that I have for you, I've got specific things that I want you to notice, that I want you to wonder about, and then what I want you to learn about. So as I mentioned in this lesson plan student and teacher actions document, I want you to notice what content is included under the brown headings, like the lesson title, the way in which the lesson progresses, so taking note of the bolded subtitles under teacher actions, and the way the format is structured between teacher and student actions. So those are the things I want you to pull out. The wondering for this one is I want you to, if there's anything that you're curious about or that you find confusing, this is a place where you can also capture that. And then at the end with your partner duo, you're going to consider that after looking at that document, what is something that you're walking away with as it relates to this third essential component of classroom management, which is plan your time. Once you it doesn't matter where you start with your partner, you can start at exhibit A or exhibit 1 or exhibit 2. You're going to also do the same process for that second resource that I've listed. So slightly different questions. And you do not, I will also say, you do not have to write in your responses unless you want to. So if you're want to capture like directly, like, oh, Miss Circle said, click through some of the comments. What correlation do you notice? If you want to directly respond in this box, you can, but if there's other things that you feel are important to capture, then go ahead and do that as well. I wanted to also name to you that this is a gallery walk, and I don't think we have done a gallery walk. Can someone really quickly, if you've done a gallery walk, can you explain to us what it is? Or if you have never done a gallery walk, can you tell us what it's like to be in an art museum? So either response would be appropriate.
I have participated in a gallery walk before. I haven't done it virtually, but in gallery walks that I've seen in the past, you and your group or partner will like reflect on something, and then after that you'll have the chance to go around and see everybody else's reflections. So it could be like in the form of a poster or like post-it notes, but it's like, you know, you get to enjoy what other people have thought about, like you're walking through a gallery.
Yeah, Haley, that's perfectly said. I appreciate you explaining that to us. So if we were in person, Haley, you're exactly right. I'm a big fan of like, well, I call it anchor chart paper, but I realize that there's other names for it too, like giant white paper. That's the cheapest one, at least that I've bought, that sticks to the wall where you can capture your thinking and post-it notes, or actually writing physically on the space, or like with a visual of some sort. And then you're rotating around from place to place to after you finish answering to view what others have. So we only have 2 exhibits today. So you're going to do some pretending here because I know we're virtual. So we will come back together after our duo time with our partner. And I'll tell you what comes after that, but I don't want to give you too many directions. I let Zoom do some automatic grouping. So this was random pairings by color here. So I just need to copy these over to the second page in just a second. And in the chat, I have posted the link for you also. Let me give you a minute, no, 30 seconds to hop in there. And then Andrew and Steve. So I know that Andrew, we chatted previously. Steve, if you don't mind like doing the scribing in this scenario, that would be super helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you can start wherever you'd like with your partner pair. Before we go though, can I get one person to really quickly recap the directions? I talked forever. What are we doing?
Yeah, so together with a friend, you're going to briefly review the document by yourself, and then together as a group, you're going to reflect and record the group's thoughts and thinkings in the boxes below. You're going to talk about, what did I notice? What do I wonder? And what did I learn?
There you go. I love it. I love the energy. I need it today. Thank you, Cody.
I think Cody should just recap all the time.
I do. I think Cody, I think you should just be on. You should be leading this class right now. I love it. Thank you so much, Cody. That's exactly right. I will pop in and assist with anything that you all need. It doesn't matter where you start. If you have any questions, I'll be with you in a moment. Your rooms are now open. So if you could click join, I'll see you soon.
How much time do we have?
About 10-ish minutes.
10-ish minutes. Okay. Thank
and
you.
I'll narrate in the chat. Or
okay.
It'll broadcast it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. Oh. Oh, sorry, Genevieve. I was trying to help out. That's the second time I've done that. Oh, Cody left entirely.
Gonna yell at my kid. You're fine.
No, it's fine.
I accidentally left the entire class.
I was just razzing you, and I was about to say Derica did too. They're done. They're like, all right, we've arrived. We've learned everything.
Yes, can't take this anymore, so I just left.
I have dog hair in my mouth. Great. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're just, okay. Austin, Chastity are coming in 8 seconds, whether they like it or not. They're going to be pulled back into this. All right, so bam. Or they left. Oh, there they are. Okay. We're back. Ripped out of your breakout rooms. Okay, so thank you for returning. Even if you accidentally left the meeting entirely. That is my biggest fear, by the way. Happened once. Okay, so you guys have had really great thinking and thoughts. I appreciate you letting me sit on and hearing each of your discussions in whatever document that you've been working out of and viewing. So if you didn't see in Zoom, I broadcasted the last message I broadcasted was to pick one box. So either the K, which is the notice, the W, the wonder, or the L box, the learned, and one resource. So you could choose exhibit 1 and you want to talk with your partner and share with the group you're wondering so we can discuss them further. Or maybe you are really intrigued by exhibit 2 and you want to talk about what you learned from that. So you have hopefully prioritized one of those with your partner pair and you are going to get the opportunity to share with us. But in typical not starting from the beginning fashion, I love to go backwards. Austin and Chastity, would you mind starting us off as the blue group, as our exemplar here? Which exhibit do you want to prioritize, the first one or the second one?
We didn't actually talk about it, but do you want to do 2?
Sure.
Okay, second.
I feel like we had good discussion about the second one.
Great. Okay, and then what box do you want to discuss with all of us? Do you want to talk about the things you wrote down from the notice, from the wonder, or from the learned?
Chastity, you pick.
So something that Austin brought up, I don't know if he'll agree with me bringing this, like this being the thing that we talk about, but I thought it was a good question and it might seem kind of maybe obvious, but something that we wondered whenever we were going through this lesson, and especially as we noticed that it like was very progressive and one question built upon the next, was what do you do if most of the students never did the reading? They hadn't done the homework, and how do you move forward with the lesson in that case?
This is a great wondering. Anybody have some thoughts?
I do. I have an idea.
Okay, Genevieve, share it.
My student teaching is in person and we're reading The Great Gatsby. And these kids are not doing the reading. Like, they're just not. So what the teacher does is, like, she will catch them up to the video, but they'll let with the video of the book, but let them know that they are still expected to go back and do the assignment that was associated with the chapter, or they're getting a 0. In the nice way.
Thank you for sharing, Genevieve. Matthew says Daisy Buchanan is my least favorite character in all of literature. Love it.
She's fake. She's
What other thoughts do you all have? Kids show up, they didn't do the work, and you're like, what am I gonna do? This is so important. So any other ideas you all have?
I think what's important.
So, do you want us to keep going?
Yeah, Austin, or I didn't know if Chastity, I'm so sorry. Were you posing it to the group, or were you posing it to Austin?
Everyone.
Everyone. Okay, so I saw Austin and Haley and maybe Andrew, but Austin, go ahead, and then we'll kick it to Haley.
No, you can skip me. I was just gonna keep going on our thoughts as a group.
Okay. Haley, you're on.
I was just gonna say, I feel like it would be good to figure out why they're not reading, why they didn't get the reading done, because that would really like change my approach. If they were just like, oh, I didn't feel like it, that would be one thing. But if they were like, this reading was so frustrating, I started it and then I just gave up because I got so frustrated, then I would want to have, instead of like a lesson about, I would just throw out my lesson plan and like talk about strategies for getting through the reading so that we would be able to proceed with the lesson plan the next time.
Haley with the antecedent. That's so important here. Or if they say this reading sucks, you're like, okay, I'm not going to use this the next time. Or if you're going to use it, you're pairing it with something, or they're figuring out a way to make it relevant. So Really well stated, Haley. Andrew, I don't know if you had something that you wanted to share or not. If you would.
She kind of covered it.
Okay, perfect.
But I was like piggybacking off the ideas. It's not necessarily, sometimes readings don't interest people, but also at times there's also stuff going on at people's homes that they don't have the availability to do the reading. And I don't think that a student should be like put on the spot about that. I think that that's where the teacher should talk to the student after class, or maybe via email and say, hey, is there anything I could do to help you? And that's kind of where I kind of stand. And if I was doing a lesson plan, I would always just assume the students didn't do what I told them to do, because they're children, they have better things to do. So I would always start from the beginning of whatever assigned reading there was and make sure that I cover main points. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask a question?
Hi, Cody.
At what point do you draw the line for personal accountability?
Think that
when it comes to children, or
for your students, for your curriculum, for your lesson plan, like at what point do you just say, where do you draw the line at?
I think I personally believe that it is a job as an educator to not draw a line at all, because if you draw a line and then if someone goes over that line, that means you're not willing to help them achieve whatever goal it is. I think that invisible line you kind of mentioned should be adjustable for each student.
So what you're saying is if you assign like 2 chapters of the reading, but they said I couldn't get 2 of them done, you adjust it to 1? Or like, what are you saying?
I would.
So would you not assign homework at all, or how would this work?
That's so, as I think you said, you pay attention to a lot of history and everything. And in history, one of my things, I would always focus on discussions, because it allows maybe students that didn't read to kind of just sit back, and you're able to kind of understand their kind of demeanor and their attitude. But if you apply it towards something that they are going through, or something that they can apply, like, I don't know how to say it. I'm not really good at articulating sometimes, but if you can apply it to a real life scenario for them, then everything will come into play, because everything has been already told once. They just don't know that they know that yet. So if they didn't read, it's one of those things. I don't know. It's my own.
Fair enough. I was just curious.
We're in a hybrid model.
Sorry, go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so where I am student teaching, they are in a hybrid model, and you are expected to read one of the chapters on the Monday, Tuesday assignment, and then in the Thursday and Friday, you can read this another chapter or do an assignment or whatever it is. But because I'm there on Thursdays, what we have been doing is that she will sit down if the student hasn't read it, but she goes over the lesson for the day first, because it's not fair to the students who did do the assignment to have to go over the assignment from the previous times. So she will usually catch up with a movie, but if that's not possible, or she'll just do it, and then after she has gone over the assignment, because these are block periods, like they're an hour and a half long, like you have time to do 2 lessons. So she'll go over the lesson for the day, and then the students who did not read or did not turn in the assignment will gather them in a little group and go over the reading and break it down for them, so that if they didn't understand it or they just didn't have time to do it, they can do it then. And also on Canvas, the chapters are recorded, so they could have gone through it the previous day, and they don't even have to read it. They just have to listen to it.
Genevieve,
do you agree with that model? I'm just curious, do you agree with that model? Like, do you think?
I mean, it's a pandemic, right? We're on hybrid.
Right.
So ideally, like, you would be able to do this in class every assignment, but
right,
because you can't, I think it's a good alternative.
You guys are bringing up so many good implications. I'm going to try to not say anything yet. I want to kick it to Bara.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to add that I agree with Andrew on the whole accountability line, because
this has changed obviously for me, because I did think that there should be accountability and that if you didn't read it, oh well, it's your fault kind of thing. But then I had a kid and I realized what kids are like. That doesn't usually work. And if you're willing to draw a line and not help that child, that there's no way for them to succeed and continue. And in my last what is it called, practicum thing that I did last semester, the teacher gave them a chapter every week, and actually every 2 days, I think, but I was only there Thursdays. And he would assume that they did not read, even though most of them did, but there were a few that didn't. So he would either read it in class or have like a full summary of the chapter for those who did not read, just to keep the class going. And like Genevieve said, we are in a pandemic, and I think we should be a little more understanding to everything that is going on. But I think with kids, we just should be more understanding in general and sympathetic, just because they are kids. Trust me. I mean, I was like very against like the whole, oh, if you didn't do it, you need to get consequences or something like that. But now I don't believe that at all, actually. And I think we should work with kids rather than, make them do things on their own and just figure it out. So.
But again, aren't we setting the bar too low? Because if you're saying that we can't assign them chapters every week because they won't do it, they can't do the reading, there's a pandemic, there's this, there's that, aren't we making excuses for them?
I don't think so, because honestly, like what you're trying to educate these kids at this age, they will reach a point, whether it's high school or higher, where they will learn the real world stuff. I think now as kids that we just want to make sure that they fully understand certain subjects that are mandatory or that they need to know and stuff like that, rather than making them feel like they can't do it. Just be that ladder for them. I don't know, be that person that helps them through it.
To speak to what Cody was saying also, like how do we, because I totally understand and I sympathize with, especially what you just said, Barah, with needing to meet students where they're at and work with them. I 100% think that's super important. Simultaneously, how do we guard against learned helplessness in the classroom? Because especially like in our classroom at the school where I work, like we've been taught that like students, like academic ownership is important. Students owning the cognitive load is important. So like, how do we find that sweet spot between meeting them where they're at and reinforcing learned helplessness? Because like equity and systemic issues aside, any student who finds themselves going to their teachers time after time after time without any sort of ownership, how at what point will they need to do it on their own?
I feel like it plays a big role. So
I feel like, sorry.
Huge. So that's my perspective, that it just depends on their age and where they're at. But
I feel like it's setting them up for failure though, because if you're constantly giving them the training wheels and constantly helping them, when they get into college, they're going to expect their professor to help them, or I don't know. I guess I was raised differently, so I understand where you guys get, like what you guys are saying makes sense, and I agree with what you're saying, but I was just raised differently. I don't know.
You all
And I think
named really, really good things. And I hate to cut it short here because I know and we got so many things to talk about, but you all bring really valid points. And I don't know, Ms. Gann, if you feel comfortable sharing some examples of the way in which you navigate this exactly in the class. And then I can also follow up with some concluding thoughts here.
I know Andrew had started to talk. Andrew, I wanted to give you a moment before I jump in, if there was like a last minute thought.
Not really 2 minutes last moment. We kind of covered it. I just think that real life scenarios need to be more applied to students. And we need to understand that some students don't comprehend things as easily as others. And so, for example, my buddy is a successful, he's actually now a millionaire, but we were sitting around playing cornhole one day, and we were doing basic math, and both of us are not mathematicians by no means, and we're tossing the bag, and we're like, oh, that's 1/3. And then next, it started making sense to us. And we're like, oh, this has made sense all of a sudden, over 10 years after we got out of high school. And so I think that some people just take different limits, but it still sticks with them. And I don't think that the children will still learn it. It just maybe will sit in the back of their mind, and they won't apply it till they're ready for it. Does it make sense?
And I definitely hear that, Andrew, and to everyone's point, like the real world application is essentially where we get that buy-in from children. And I think that is the power in having their voice from the beginning, from the get-go. I'm currently using a novel study, and to this exact argument, I have two students who were very out and open about the fact that they didn't want to read, they didn't enjoy reading. And so I asked them separately what would be the best option for them. Because yes, we are going to have things in life that we don't want to do, and you're going to have things that you don't want to read. But I let them buy into this space on their own terms. And so it looked initially trying to get that response, it looked as if we were looking at it together. Then it became more of an independent factor. But to Cody's point, like the expectation was never lowered. They were still expected to come to class and be ready to discuss. They were still expected to listen to what their peers were saying. If they hadn't read the text, the expectation was that you are showing up with your best foot forward. If you read one paragraph of that chapter, you can speak to one paragraph of that chapter. If you read 2 chapters ahead, you want to discuss that, you want to draw those connections, and also the discussion within students allows them to hear that. I don't know who made that point as well, but when you're discussing in class, that is such an opportunity for students who aren't comfortable with the text or aren't comfortable with reading it independently. That gives them the voice that they need. And I know, and especially with virtual, they just didn't have time to do it, or they felt that other work was important, which, you know, that's like a dagger to the heart in my ELA. I'm like, well, why isn't my work important? Because it's harder, right? It's a lot more internalizing, but it's never a space where they don't have to show up with their real self. It's never a space where they don't show up with their experiences. And it's not a space where I am going to say, no, it's okay, you didn't do it today. It's you're ready to discuss with us, and I will work to make sure that you catch up at some point. So it is a fine balance, and it is not easy. It's not, because I have 36 sixth graders in my space and they don't always read the text. They all have some experience. They can all tie it. That goes back to that relationship piece at the beginning of the year. What do you want to read? What is your interest? What can you speak to, regardless of whether you've read this text or not? You look at it while we're doing this quick discussion, be ready to share it in 2 minutes, and I come back to them. So, there's definitely a fine line, but you all have made some really good points. That was just kind of a real life example that I've currently living. So.
Thank you for sharing, Miss Gam. We appreciate it. Austin, I'm sorry, I'm bad at apparently reading visual cues. You've had this little like icon hand raise in the corner. So this is perfect, because then Chastity and Austin, if there's any final concluding thoughts, that we'll wrap up with you and move to the next example.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask Ms. Gann, like, for me as a student, I've always just felt this burden of like, if you don't come to class having done the whole reading, that you're going to get like insulted, like grilled, punished. But I like what you're saying about, if you read a paragraph, you can contribute on one paragraph. Like, okay, so on the aspects of equity, are we saying it's okay if not every student does the whole reading, but like, hey, you're here today, like, let me get something out of you, or like, let me help you learn something from this lesson, even if you're not going to learn as much as, you know, your peers that are like exceedingly like meeting expectations. Is that kind of, even if you're going to privately like work to catch them up?
Mm-hmm. So the expectation that they don't do it is never reinforced. They still have that expectation of the work still is going to be done and the conversation is still going to take place. But what you bring to this conversation is valued, and what you can bring and what you can bring to our discussion it's the growth mindset. It's, you may not have done it today, but you did do it 2 weeks ago. And so I still value the work and the effort that you did put into it. But regardless of what those factors are, I am going to empathize with the fact that you didn't have time to do this part today. Doesn't mean that you can't contribute. And so there is the equity piece of acknowledging individual students and their needs and the things that they're going through. But it's that empathy versus sympathy. I know you're capable of doing it because you showed me 2 weeks ago. And so it's okay today. I'm going to let you have that room to, and it may be engage less, but I still want you to be a part of the discussion. And so then the next week, my expectation remains. You're coming to this discussion with the same thought or with the same mindset of, I know I can do this. And so it's the growth mindset piece. It's, I know someone mentioned the learned helplessness as well. We want to promote the fact that you are capable of more than you think you're capable of doing. And I'm going to hold you to that expectation regardless of where you feel like you're at coming to this conversation. And I think it's a mindset piece as well, so that we promote that positivity versus, well, I didn't do it this time, so I shouldn't engage in class.
That's really interesting, because I just think like, oh, if a kid doesn't do the reading this week, they're going to get behind and they're going to continue being behind. They're not going to catch up, and then they're going to give up. But if you continue to push them to keep growing and keep adding, there's that growth mindset, what you're saying. Like,
absolutely.
That stuck with me. Like I would not have thought about that.
And we instill them. They certainly will not come, well, not all of them, I can't say all of them. That, and I'm going to point to Professor Zirkle, because she is like, I don't even know what the word is, fantastic with the growth mindset, as far as instilling that not only in children, but in adults, because it starts with us. If I bring you to a space and expect very little of you, if I lower expectations for some students, they read you like a book and they see that. But if I instill growth mindset from the get-go, and this is the expectation, that expectation doesn't change, but I'll acknowledge the needs that you have, but my expectation remains, they start to believe in that growth mindset too. And I know, Zirkle, you can talk to adults in that space that haven't had that, and you see in that space that children are less engaged. They don't want to bring their whole self to that space. So super important that we start there.
Yep. I really have nothing else to add. Matthew, you're right. They do play us like a fiddle, and they know that, and not for any like, demeaning things on their end. It's just they will do what we hold them to. And so all of this conversation, I don't want us to move too far away from, we just read the warm demander. So like, high expectations is the expectation. We don't lower that. We understand that not all of our students are going to meet that, but that doesn't mean we pity them or we feel bad for them. We have empathy for them, and we help to close that gap, but we continue to push in other ways, private conversations, coaching, the phone calls home, all these like really lived action steps that help to embody the work that you guys are talking about. Whoa, that was some deep stuff, Austin and Chastity. I'm going to push us along. I know we could probably keep talking about this, but I do have the task of getting you out at 7:15 tonight. So, and if you want to keep talking, I'll leave it open for as long as you want. But I'm going to forge ahead and kind of a little forcefully push us to continue. So I'm sorry about that. I love to linger longer, but you guys really, I think, named a lot of good stuff. We're going to move to Barat and Genevieve. Which exhibit would you like to discuss? And then which, are you in the KW or L part?
We're going to discuss the first one, right?
We didn't pick which one. We just talked about Wonder. We're going to do the one.
So we're just going to talk about the first one on Wonder, because we were wondering how can she identify for the student's prior knowledge? Because that's not something she talked about there.
Yeah. So just as reference, if you guys have that lesson plan up with the teacher actions, student actions, one of the things that Genevieve and Baran noted that like would have been a really great thing for her to write into the student, both the teacher actions and the student actions was something about prior knowledge. So how could we enhance this lesson? Does anyone have any ideas? And I'll take 2 people so that we could keep going. Sorry to cap it again. 2 ideas. In what ways could this teacher incorporate an opportunity where she's using the teacher actions and the student actions to address prior knowledge?
I can say something, I guess.
Go ahead, bro. Yeah.
I thought of it when we were looking at it, but in the teacher's action, the first part, introduction part, she says the students do nothing. So maybe kind of like an activity, kind of what we do in this class and whatnot, something at the beginning, a few questions, just to kind of see where everybody's at. Like an opener, I guess, would be nice, instead of students doing nothing while she talks and just introduces the topic. So
Farah, you bring up such a good point. Are students really ever doing nothing? No, they're definitely doing something. And if we think they're doing nothing, they're gonna do something. So I love Haley's like, absolutely no. That's a hard no. So I think that lends itself to this key point here is that we like plan for every second. If you don't have a second for how kids are entering, they're gonna enter how they want to enter. And chances are it's not gonna be the most appeasing way in which you envision. And so we need to practice that with them and actually make sure that the time that we're using helps them get them to wherever we need to be. Good point. Any other person want to add on to their wondering? All right, guys, I appreciate you playing in with the time constraints. Now we're like going super hard and like, okay, cap it. Next. Andrew and Steve, would you like to review exhibit 1 or 2, and which part would you like to speak out to?
I think Steve had a good point on 2. If he wants to state that again, that would be great. But if not.
Sure. Steve, would you like to elaborate on the K, W, or L part?
The L part.
Okay. What'd you learn from that resource about double planning?
So what I liked about it was how the teacher that designed the lesson was for one thing, like I feel like the teacher really knows their class. And so it seems like they were really anticipating almost anything that was going to happen. And so I really like that, which is like which is notated by Hernandez on the right, like just really anticipating like, well, at this point, I bet like there's going to be like questions here, or there's going to be time for this, time for that. And especially like they have this point, like there should be never there's not going to be a case where students can be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And so it's like they know there's going to be a student that may like try to like, well, I know like at some point they're going to be like, say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Well, no, you're not, because I have that planned out too. And so I really like that, and really like, because I've written, as part of the program, we learned how to write lesson plans. But I didn't consider what I now will consider. So when I do at this point of the lesson, this might, like these 3 or 4 things may happen. This is what I'll do to respond to that, or how to get students to think for at this point in time where I want them to think, or whatever, like how I can help steer them that way. And so I really like that they just like pretty much like anticipate like any sort of precursors at all, and how there's not going to be like, and it's like a reminder to them too, like they always know as well how this lesson is going to progress. Now, and I will say, like I made the first comment, they seem to know their class. I feel like you would have to really know your class for this to execute the way that they're really anticipating it's going to. They're going to know how all their students are, because you can fail to say long, but we don't know, you still don't know how the students are going to be during this lesson, pretending on the day. So I guess I would say anticipate that as well, that even though you have this meticulous plan, this is planned out like the way, it's still probably not going to go 100% the way you wrote out that's going to, what I mean? Which kind of brings me to like the time aspect. Like I like that they put, this will be 5 minutes, this will be 20 minutes, but in my head, I'm like, there is no way it's going to be exact to that. You're going to go over, you're going to go under, but I feel at the same time, this kind of instructor anticipates that too. And they may have more time, or, we may lose some time here. So anyways, I like that. That's what I took from it.
Even Andrew, like, wow, that was like, if we could provide a summary for like what double planning is and why it's important, you nailed it 100%. Kudos to you. Yeah, and you're right, we put time limits, and of course sometimes like they're not exactly what we anticipate, but it's what we shoot for. In all reality, I have time stamps. I'd make a lesson plan for this class, I have time stamps like it's going to take this long, and I'm like, so that's why you hear me going, okay, I'm going to push really hard for us to continue now, because this activity I have planned for 5:45. So you're right, and we adjust and we pivot, and I'm already thinking ahead about what I'm going to do. love what you and Andrew mentioned about like there's no greater disservice than going, okay, everyone, here's an activity, bye, and like walking aimlessly around the classroom and be like, hey, how's it going? It's like, but like, what? We got to anticipate what's happening here. So like Steve said, where are they going to get confused? What are they going to be confused on? So we are maximizing like literally every single moment of time with kids, because we don't even have enough time as it is. So really great work, Steve and Andrew. Thank you so much. Okay, we're on to Derica and Matthew. Which exhibit are we congregating around, 1 or 2?
2.
2. And do you want to talk about the KW or L part?
Derica, is it okay if we talk about the K?
That's
okay,
fine.
so I wanted to talk about a really awesome, because things to know, we were talking about paying special attention to these comments that were left on the right-hand side of the document. Question 4, I want to draw everyone's attention to Aunt Alexandra is a foil to Atticus and highlights the ways in which Atticus is an unconventional parent. Explain how the introduction of Aunt Alexandra helps the reader learn about Atticus. So she does give a baseline definition of unconventional parent, or specifically unconventional, but what she does that I think is super successful is what I put under the what I noticed was that she is guiding student thinking through higher order questions. She's asking students to use inductive reasoning to determine what foil means based on the example she gives. So she's not saying, so in the text, with her question, she's not saying, here's what foil means, look for it. She's elaborating on an example of foil. So in that way, she's being inductive, where she's like, here's an example, now identify this based on what you see. And I thought that was a super powerful strategy and question, because she is able to guide students while simultaneously keeping the cognitive load on them.
Really great work, Matthew. Way to get meta in there. Perfect. Very intentional with our practices as well. I think that's another highlight I pull out of this resource, and you nailed it 100%. Okay, let's go to our last group then. So we've got Cody and Haley. Where would you like us to look, and what would you like to discuss with us?
Yeah, we were going to do exhibit 1, and Haley and I agreed on What I Wonder. Is that correct? Yeah, and we had like 4 questions. Mine was, how's a teacher monitoring for student assessment? Because I mean, they pretty much just say the teacher has student work individually to demonstrate the sign 10 on their calculator. But I mean, is that really a good form of assessment? I don't know. Could you add more to that? Like, I don't know. And is and a good question that Haley asked, is the monitoring happening at the same time as a guided practice, or is it just in the slotted time of, oh, we're going to do this for 5 minutes? I mean, you can't really assess every single student's, their assessment in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I noticed that segment didn't have a time frame attached to it. That's why I was a little bit confused about where it fit in with the structure of the lesson plan.
Yeah, and how would they attack this at a virtual setting as well? So I mean,
for the virtual part, that was my question. So I don't know. I don't know if it's just because my CTs haven't established maybe routines. I mean, I don't want to like blame them, but like I've noticed like last semester, every single class period, students would be like, where do we go? And the answer was always the same. And so I'm not really sure where like the disconnect was happening, but it seemed like a lot of time was being lost on like re-explaining instructions, especially too, because in virtual, like a lot of students are logging in at different times, and you can't like necessarily expect that if you give instructions at 1 o'clock, then like the kids who come in at 1:15, they need to get caught up. So yeah, I guess something that's been really challenging is watching my cooperating teachers handle time and time management when students are all coming in at different times and like getting kicked off and stuff needs to get re-explained. And then, yeah, so that's a question that I have.
That's such a great question. And I normally I'd open it up and be like, what do you guys think? But in fairness to time, exactly what we're talking about. Haley, the things that you ask, we're actually going to talk about in class. So like we know that there are two sides of this coin. So we must have our time planned to the second so that kids can understand what's happening to the second. And so one of the things that you brought up is like the importance of having things like shared orally in writing, pictures, and we're going to explore this exactly. And we can, it's much easier in the physical space, but we can do it in the virtual space as well. So I'm excited to explore a little bit more, but I would say pictures and visual cues, whenever you could use them, we're going to do it. And I know that's something that in our ESOL world, like we know that is such a great thing for kids, but it's great for all kids using Relia, all that good stuff. So yes, you guys have such good wonderings about like how is this done effectively. And what I want us to walk away from here is if we're truly being successful with this essential component of classroom management number 3, which is plan your time to the second, we're literally thinking through what's happening, what am I doing, what are students doing, and really having any like an anticipation for any of those things. I was talking to Haley and Cody and sharing with them when, you know, a kid is peeing, puking, and now I came from elementary school, on your carpet, like you got to keep going. And I am terrified of vomit. Like it was hard for me to control my own self, let alone like keep going with the lesson. But we have to have our lesson or whatever we're saying so internalized that it's just like, boom, I'm not going to skip a beat, even though inside I'm like, I'm dying, or like you're spitting on the carpet, what's happening? Like, or this child is experiencing something where they are not ready to learn. They're rolling on the floor, they're screaming, they're crying, whatever, but we're just without a drop of a second, like you're on. So that's one of the key things I want to take away from this, from that first resource that we looked at. And then from the second one, you know, that we're being really intentional with not only what we're giving kids, but like how we're maximizing our time when they're doing whatever we want them to be doing. So planning your time to the second, it takes a long time. And in the beginning, it's going to feel like, oh my God, I'm planning so much, because you literally are planning everything to the second. But after you kind of get that flow and like know what to expect, this is going to come with time and when you're going to do it with ease. A fun fact, in my lesson plans, when I first started writing them, I would write down everything, you know, what was happening, why it was important, how it was going on. And that truly helped me to better address the disruptions that were happening in class, because we know they're going to happen, and we still carry on and pretend like everything is fine, but it's not. So really appreciate you guys engaging in that and walking away with some tools for your toolbox for how to plan your time to the second. It's up to you to figure out how like this exactly fits into your practice, but you've got the framework for what the expectations are and how to make sure you do that effectively. So here's what we're going to do. We are I am pivoting slightly, and we're going to pair a break with our activity. So I'm going to explain to you what's happening in just a moment. I just closed out of my tab. Here we go. So in just a moment, you are going to have in the chat a link to a different document, but I want you to scroll down to the second page. We'll do the first page next week. So we're going to do a break, and we're going to do a reading on the pedagogy of poverty versus good teaching. So I want to front load you with what the expectation is before you go on break/reading, so that when we come back together, you are ready to go. So in just a moment, you're going to have this document. You're going to scroll past page 1 to page 2. So you're going to first read this pedagogy of poverty versus good teaching. It's kind of thick, and I'm not going to lie that it is thick. So if we don't get to the end of it, that's totally fine. After you get into it, you're going to catch the gist of what the pedagogy of poverty is and how the author highlights it. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. No, I'm going to give you 20 minutes. I'm going to adjust this 20 minutes to read the article / take a break. So you have your time and you can use that however you wish. In that 20 minutes, you're reading, breaking. You're also recording a quote or learning from that text and talking about why it's important or the impact it has on your practice. And this is going to be our exit ticket out tonight. So we'll unmute ourselves, do a round robin. And what I really want to know is how is this informing your practice? This directly connects to that class reaction. What are the implications here? How are you going to apply this? So I'm really keen on hearing what you're walking away with tonight. So I'm going to give you actually 21 minutes to 7 o'clock. So break and read as you see fit. I'll be here if anyone has any questions or anything, but let's meet back here at 7 o'clock. Feel free to turn your camera off if you'd like. Thanks, Haley. I'll turn the music on lightly in the background. If that bothers you, just turn your volume off.
A3, it's also page 3 of the PDF. The classroom atmosphere created by constant teacher direction and student compliance seized with passive resentment that sometimes bubbles up into overt resistance. So I think like 2 weeks, was it 2 weeks ago? We were talking about authoritarianism or authoritative teaching styles. That picture came into my mind when thinking about this, where a good teaching style is one that's active. Students are like the whole day is planned to the second, and you know what students are doing the whole time. There's not this like expectation that they just sit and listen, because if they're just sitting and listening, they're probably not listening at all. They're completely doing something else in their head.
Or out loud, or like physically, they're like, yep, you're right. Really well said, Austin. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, I realized I don't think I shared my screen when I spun the wheel last time. Next person on, we are definitely ending class at 7:15, is Haley. You are on. Go ahead, read your quote. I said I was going to read it, but you got it.
All right. I will pull up my quote. Okay, so the quote I chose was, "The whole school faculty and school community, not the individual teacher, must be the unit of change, and there must be patience and persistence of application, since students can be expected to resist changes to a system they can predict and know how to control." So I chose this quote for 2 reasons. So the first reason why I chose it is because I feel like it points to the need for change, not at the individual or classroom level, but at the level of departments, schools, districts, communities, etc. And I also chose this quote because I think it is really important to recognize that students might not respond to this particular instructional approach right away. Like students are gonna default to what has been the familiar pattern for them, because that's just what humans do. So I think it's important to recognize that it's going to take time for these changes to take root.
That's right. Good words. Good words. I'm struggling with words here. Nice, nice, nice. Thank you for your reflection, Haley. Our next sharer outer is going to be Bara. You are on.
So the quote I chose was, "Below the facade of control by teachers is another more powerful level on which students actually control, manage, and shape the behavior of their teachers." First of all, it took me forever to write on that thing. I don't know what was going on.
I don't know either. I was like, what is happening? Oh, but keep going.
I copied and pasted it. Something triggered it. I don't know what was happening, but I was struggling. So I basically just talked about how it made me think about our previous conversation when we talked about like the students and how their needs are so important that we need to, you know, focus on what they need, because I mean, you're there to teach them. So obviously like they're going to have an upper hand on controlling you as a teacher and what you do in that class kind of. So that has kind of stood out for me, because I know for a fact me as a teacher, I'm going to be looking at what my students need and what can help them. So technically they are controlling what I do. So yeah.
Yes. And like for all the good things, like there's lots of good that comes out of it. And then sometimes you're like, oh man, I gotta pivot completely. What's my plan? Awesome. Okay. Next. So we've got a few people left. Next participant is Cody. You are on.
All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can hear you, we can hear you.
All right, so the quote that I chose was, whenever students are being helped to see major concepts, big ideas, and general principles, and are not merely engaged in the pursuit of facts, good teaching is going on, page 84. And I chose this because this is important to my practice, because all too often the traditional model of teaching has been teach students facts, students memorize facts, then they take a test. Fact memorization only works for a specific amount of time, and then those facts fall to the wayside. So it is important for a teacher to help all students critically think about the subject they are teaching, understand those concepts and principles on more than just a surface level. That is the key. A student can know all the facts in the world, but if they do not know how to apply those facts to the major concepts of the lesson, issues can arise. Also, students must be involved in this process. Critically thinking is a must for all curriculums, not just learning facts. Students must learn to use their minds, not just be a walking encyclopedia.
Nice. I love it. The passion behind it too. You're right. Kids are not going to remember facts if we only teach facts. So that's like, that goes back to engaging teaching. Kids need to be engaged. So Cody, I think you summarized it really well. So nice work. Nice work indeed. Okay, so we've got just a few people left. And the next person on board to share is going to be Chastity. You are on.
Okay, let me try to find the tab where this is located. Sorry.
Okay. I know. I've got like 7 tabs up, which is actually pretty
I
good.
have like 30 right now. Okay.
Oh,
I don't
envy you.
I don't want to talk about it. So the quote that I chose wasn't necessarily like the most poignant for the whole article, but it was one that really stood out to me as I was reading. And it says, the pedagogy of poverty appeals to those who themselves did not do well in schools. People who have been brutalized are usually not rich sources of compassion, and those who have failed or done poorly in school do not typically take personal responsibility for that failure, and they generally find it easier to believe that they would have succeeded if only somebody had forced them to learn. And I was thinking whenever I was reading this about how kind of what we learned last week with the strategy of being the warm demander is kind of, I think, a direct response to this kind of outdated thinking. And it's a more contemporary and like research supported strategy that kind of addresses all of these concerns that are brought up in this article. So I was just kind of thinking about how utilizing that strategy of being the warm demander kind of mitigates the issues that this article is bringing up.
Yeah. Yep. The implications are real here. And I think that to your point, Milner talks about that, and I'm bringing up again the critical self-reflection. And if we aren't critically self-reflecting based on our own experiences, we're not going to be able to maybe provide the best experience for kids. Because my experience growing up is very different than what our kids in front of us have experienced. And so it's important to take that into consideration. Really well said, Chastity. Okay, then there were 4. So we've got Matthew, you're on.
Hello. Sorry that I was late. I was stepped away from my desk and I kind of let time escape me. Give me 1 second.
You want us to come back?
Please do.
Coming back. See, that's the warm demander, right there. Like, oh, sympathy would be like, oh, it's okay, Matthew, you don't have to participate. Empathy is like, I'm so sorry you didn't have a moment, we'll come right back, because we want to hear his thoughts. He's got good stuff to say. Thanks for the claps, Ashley. Okay, so we're coming back, and we are going to go with Steve. You're on now.
I put, in reality, the pedagogy of poverty is not a professional methodology at all. It is not supported by research, by theory, or by the best practice of superior urban teachers. I chose that because I'm really big on research, research supportive approaches, and so I thought, for why is it important and really how it would impact my practice, kind of both, is just basically just like, if the research doesn't support that it actually works, and it's kind of just this old dying practice that, I would, especially if I walked into a school I got hired at and I saw that's what was happening, I would try to advocate for actually research supported approach. I'm gonna try to change that to be more effective for those students, and to what did I put here? Yeah, basically just to advocate for to, as they put it, foster learning. So that's as far as the rating that I got. So yeah, I feel like we're just doing a disservice to continue using that.
Good. Well said, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, we've got Andrew or Derica, and it is Andrew, and the lovely applause. All right, Andrew, you're on.
Sorry. Was it Bra? I think already kind of covered it. I just went into a little bit more detail. Am I right on the name? Sorry, I have a horrible name. Yeah, I think, was it her that covered it? That said, below the facet of control is another powerful level of students actually control, manage, and shape the behavior of their teachers. Students reward teachers by complying. They punish by resisting, and the way students mislead teachers into believing that some things work while other things don't. What I kind of said to this, I said, teaching is the activity of teachers for the purpose of an education. It's the arrangement of and manipulation of a situation to overcome a certain problem or a learning experience. But we must not underestimate students and the power that they have to control situations around them. The student and teacher relationships are crucial for success of both teachers and students. As part of the classroom management, the relationships are significant in determining teachers' work is successful. The influences teachers' behaviors play an important role in academic achievements of the students.
Well said, Andrew. Thanks so much. We're going to go Derica, and then we're going to go Matthew.
Okay, so the quote that I picked was, whenever students are involved in planning what they will be doing, it is likely that good teaching is going on. And I just think having students be involved in what they're learning about and kind of helps them not only have their voice being heard, but also helps with them learning. And I just think, when I think about counseling, when I'm helping a student, with an issue or trying to give them a solution, I think it's good to always have their input and not tell them what to do or what needs to be done.
Derica and I sat in on a PD together today where we learned about restorative practices through circle processes. And I think that speaks to that experience that we'll get to explore more in many months. All right, Matthew, we are saving our very best for last. So you are on. You're going to conclude our class tonight.
So the quote that I picked was actually rather small, but I thought it was significant. And it was on page 85. And it was actually the quote right below one that seemed to be quite popular among a lot of my classmates. But the quote I picked was, "At all levels and in all subjects, key concepts can be made meaningful and relevant." And I really like this because I think it validates the cultures, backgrounds, and experiences of many different people in both the student body and in the faculty. And so in this way, concepts and themes relevant to our society at large can be extracted in both a critical and a meaningful way. So like it reminds me of like one of my favorite quotes by like John Keats, which is like, beauty is truth and truth is beauty. And so like that's what it made me think of. And so it just really stuck out to me right away when I was going through this.
Really good quote. Appreciate that we saved our best for last here. And I hope you all know that's my plug because I'm always last for everything and I hate it. So thank you, Matthew, for sticking with it. We appreciate you. I just want to make sure that before we end tonight, I'm naming 2 things. So I want to name that I really appreciate your hard work and input during class tonight. You all demonstrated vulnerability and you pushed through discomfort that I know I felt, and maybe you felt it as well. This work is really hard and your investment in this work is really important. And I saw that tonight. So thank you so much. Secondly, I took 4 minutes of your time, so I will give you 10 minutes back next week. I apologize for that. Okay, we have come to the conclusion of class where I need you to set the chat to private, please. And in the private chat to me, I would love for your self-reflection score out of 10. So that's with your preparation and your engagement tonight. And then any questions or comments you have, I will be happy. I always respond to your thinking in the self-reflection score that you give me and when I put it in Canvas. Other than that, after you set the chat to private, if there's anything you need, I'm here to chat, do anything that you need. I'm really struggling with words tonight, guys. I'm like not on my game tonight, and I apologize for that too. I will post the announcement with the video if you want to reference that. And if there is anything else you need, feel free to hang on. If not, I hope you have a wonderful week. And I hope you enjoy your day off on Monday.
Do we get the day off on Wednesday?
Yeah.
We're going to come and celebrate our day off from Monday during class on Wednesday because our work is so important. And I'm going to make sure I gift you some time back because I stole 4 to 5 minutes of it. So we'll end class next week at 7:05. Hope you all have a good week. I can't really see all of your faces, so if you're waving to me.
Thank you for the good class. Hope all of you have a good week, good weekend. I'll see you all next Wednesday.
Cody, thank you for your positive energy always.
Hey, always positive energy, even when my team loses the Super Bowl and I want to cry. But you know, all right, bye guys. See ya.
Bye everyone.
So I had a question about the assignment that was due today.
Yes, absolutely. Hold on one second. Let me, I'm going to stop sharing. Hope everyone's okay with that. I'm going to stop recording too.